There was a time, not that long ago it seems, when you couldn't really buy much of anything in the city on a Sunday. That has changed. Then it was statutory holidays where most stores were closed. Again, that is changing. And now many retail workers in York Region are upset with a new bylaw that would allow businesses to open on all statutory holidays with the exception of Christmas Day. York Region Council passed the bylaw last month. It comes into effect on the 1st of January. Yesterday, a group of retail workers asked Council to hold off on putting the bylaw in place until there's been more consultation. Council said no. It moves ahead as of the 1st of January. John Cartwright is president of the Toronto and York Region Labour Council, and he is with me in studio now. Good morning.
Good morning.
As I mentioned, times have changed. There was that fight, an epic fight in this city around Sunday shopping. Now, of course, most stores are open on Sundays. Many stores are open on statutory holidays. What's wrong with opening them across the calendar except for Christmas Day?
I guess the impact of taking stat holidays away from 64,000 people in York Region and saying you have to be able to work for 364 days a year is really quite astounding. And people were shocked last month to find out York Region, with no consultation, with no public notice, with no public hearings, had with a stroke of pen taken away 8 of the 9 stat holidays from over 60,000 people in that region.
As I mentioned, retail workers were asking yesterday for more consultation. You're saying there was no consultation at all?
There was no public consultation of any kind. The first people found out about this was when it was a little notice in the newspaper the day after York Region acted. In some cases, one of the people there yesterday was an assistant store manager, had come back from holidays last week and been told she's working on New Year's Day for the first time in her life.
And at its core, that is what the issue is for you, the process, but also just the fact that these people would have to work on New Year's Day, on what normally would be a statutory holiday for just about everybody.
Well, it's a busy pace of life these days. Is getting busier and busier, and having holidays where you can actually get together with your family, whether that's Family Day, which we only just got in the last number of years, or it's Canada Day to celebrate our country, or it's Thanksgiving Day to be with your family together. Those are days where people can actually know they have some pause and some rest. The retail industry, a lot of people are working crazy hours, sometimes 2 jobs, 3 jobs. Mm. And what we heard from people yesterday was, on a stat holiday, where are we going to find childcare? On a stat holiday, the transit doesn't run as often. And this is going to have a huge impact. These are the only sure days we know we can get together with our families, and that's the heartbreaking part of it.
As you understand it, why did Council make this decision to open on stat holidays?
Well, the province changed the law a few years ago to allow municipalities to allow exemptions for tourist areas, and Toronto has that with the Eaton Centre and the Distillery District. York Region had it for Pacific Mall and the Vaughan Mills. Yeah. And then a whole number of stores started coming forward and say, oh, I want that as well. And there's a Winners in Vaughan that describes itself as a tourist center, and that was given the authority. So staff said, well, this is too much of a bother to deal with all these things. We'll just do a blanket exception.
So the exemptions were too onerous, just kind of.
Well, they're saying there were too many exemptions. The irony is, according to the law, when you create an exemption, you must hold some form of public notice, a lower tier municipality. And one of the deputants yesterday, a resident businessman who was furious about this, asked, why didn't you follow the law? The answer was, oh, well, under the Retail Business Holiday Act, we would have had to do those things. But we did this under the Municipal Planning Act, so we had no need to provide any notice or have any public meetings of any kind.
How would you have liked to have seen Council handle this?
Well, there's a contrast with what the City of Toronto did. The City of Toronto is faced with exactly the same issues. 4 or 5 years ago, they struck a task force. They invited in all the stakeholders, franchise owners, mall owners, the big businesses, the independent convenience stores, and yes, the workers themselves. And they had a deep discussion about what elements of these things were important, and they held public meetings in 4 parts of the city. That's what should have happened in Vaughan and York Region in order for workers to be able to say, this is what works, this is what didn't. They would have had a different outcome if they've had actual public feedback.
Do you worry, and I mentioned this in light of what I said earlier on, which is that times have changed and people now, they work different schedules, so maybe the stat is the time when they have the opportunity to go shopping, but also we now have this expectation that we can buy anything at any time. You can do your Christmas shopping in the middle of the night in your pajamas sitting at the computer, or you could go out to a store just about any day of the year to go shopping. Do you worry that in some respects, and this doesn't take away from the concerns that you had around childcare or around transit, but that the world is changing in this way, and that to speak on behalf of the rights of workers is a bit like facing a tide?
Yeah, and we all understand that times are changing and internet shopping is here to stay. But when the Chamber of Commerce head describes workers' rights and laws protecting workers as red tape that should be gotten rid of, then that tells us the values we're talking about. We're talking about, do you care about families and having healthy communities where people get that time together? Or is everything sacrificed on the altar of the almighty dollar, and any business that wants to do whatever they can gets to trample over people's family health? But it's, those are the big value propositions. Yeah. The outrageous thing is for this government to move ahead, pass a law that affects tens of thousands of their residents.
64,000 people,
64,000 with zero consultation, zero public notice. That is not democracy. And that's one of the things that people are most angry about as well. And I think that's the question of democracy in York Region is going to spill over into 2018 as well.
Well, do you worry that it could spill over into the City of Toronto as well? York Region is essentially across a highway from the City of Toronto. The businesses in the City of Toronto may say, listen, if this is happening here, we're losing out on business. They're going to go back to council and say, we need to have the same laws that York has.
Well, that's the logical conclusion, isn't it? And the Retail Council is already saying, now we've won York Region, we're going to go to Peel, which is the next largest region.
Just across the highway.
Just across the highway. So it's one of those things that, if you could say, somebody says, I'm able to use child labor again because I've somehow gotten around that red tape, and everybody else would say, well, then I need to use child labor as well. I mean, we have these regulations in place so that people can have some kind of decent quality of life.
Is there anything, just finally, that you're going to continue to do to fight this? The council says that it's going ahead and they will not have further consultation.
Council's going ahead, but those retail workers in that room yesterday, Matt, they were furious. They're losing New Year's Day, but they want to do a lot of mobilizing around Family Day. I mean, the government of Ontario recognized families need time together. They put that in place. You don't need to be able to buy a jug of milk on Family Day. And if you do, there's convenience stores around for those things. So there's going to be a lot of organizing around Family Day. And then I think there'll be a lot of organizing around Canada Day. And we'll be going to those municipalities in Vaughan, in Markham, in Richmond Hill, and Newmarket, in Gwillimbury, and Georgina, and Stouffville, and asking those local politicians why you're making people work on these days that are supposed to be so important to us as a nation.
John, thank you.
You're welcome.
John Cartwright is president of the Toronto and York Region Labour Council. The council leading the fight, as you heard, against a new bylaw in York Region. It allows retail businesses to stay open on all statutory holidays with the exception of Christmas. The new bylaw comes into effect on the 1st of January. And yes, as you heard, workers will be working on New Year's Day. What do you make of this decision? Something that you perhaps would be affected by? Do you live in York Region? Do you work in York Region? Do you shop in York Region? Do you think that you should have that day, those days, protected to be with family, friends, just not on the clock? Or have times changed, and do we need to be able to buy anything at any time, no matter what the day is? Give us a call, Foxbox 416-205-5807. On Twitter, one listener, Ellen, says the new law should require that on stat holiday openings, the owners must also be on the premises. If it's a chain, then all board members should be there on the premises as well. Not sure that would happen, but one perspective. Again, 416-205-5807, Twitter @MetroMorning, 21 minutes after 6.